company fired me for stealing a client. 3 months later, the same client walked into the boardroom and asked why I wasn't running the project. I was halfway through a Monday morning meeting when my manager suddenly pushed a folder across the conference table and said, "We're terminating your employment effective immediately." My heart started pounding. I stared at him, completely confused. I'd worked for the company for 8 years, had never missed a deadline, and had just brought in our biggest client of the year. Then he opened the folder and showed me emails supposedly proving I'd been secretly negotiating with the client to start my own competing business. My face went cold. "These aren't mine," I whispered. My manager shook his head. "Our investigation says otherwise." I looked around the conference room at 6, coworkers staring at me like I'd committed a crime. My hands started trembling. I wanted to scream, but instead I quietly packed my laptop and walked out. For the next 3 months, I couldn't find another job. Every interview seemed to end with the same question: "Why were you fired?" I couldn't explain without sounding defensive, so I simply said there had been a misunderstanding. Meanwhile, the company took credit for the client contract I'd spent 2 years developing. I eventually started freelancing from my apartment, working late nights at my kitchen table. It wasn't glamorous, but slowly I rebuilt my confidence. Then one Tuesday morning, I received an unexpected email from the same client. The subject line said, "We need to talk." My heart immediately skipped. The client asked me to meet them at their headquarters. When I arrived, their CEO looked directly at me and said, "We know you didn't steal anything." My entire body froze. He explained that they'd recently discovered their internal emails had been altered before being forwarded to my former employer. Someone had edited the messages to make it look like I'd been negotiating behind the company's back. They had also found unusual login activity connected to my former manager's assistant. I could barely breathe. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. The CEO slid a contract across the table. "Because we want you to finish what you started." 2 weeks later, I received a call from my former company's CEO. His voice sounded completely different from the confident executive who had fired me. "We made a serious mistake," he said. I stayed silent. "The evidence against you was manipulated. We've terminated the employees responsible, and we'd like you to come back." I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because 6 months earlier, I'd begged them for one chance to prove myself. Now they were begging me. "What position?" I asked. He hesitated. "Director of Client Operations." I looked at the offer letter and smiled. I didn't accept immediately. Instead, I asked for one condition. Every employee involved in terminating me must be removed from the investigation process, and the company needs a written policy protecting employees from termination, based solely on manipulated digital evidence. There was a long silence. Finally, he agreed. When I walked back into that same boardroom months later, everyone looked uncomfortable. My former manager wasn't there. The CEO stood up and introduced me as the company's newest director of client operations. I looked around the table and calmly said, "The last time I sat here, I was accused of stealing. Today, I'm here because the truth finally caught up with the people who lied." The client contract was completed successfully, and within a year, our division became the company's fastest growing department. I never forgot what happened, though. Every time someone brought me a disciplinary case, I asked for evidence, context, and the employee's side before making a decision, because I knew exactly what it felt like to have your entire reputation destroyed by a story that wasn't true. Losing that job felt like the worst thing that had ever happened to me, until I realized it had forced me to discover that my career wasn't tied to one company. Sometimes getting pushed out of a room is exactly what you need to build your own table. If your company fired you based on fake evidence and later offered you a better position, after discovering the truth, would you go back? Yes, no.